If I knew about the great male filter from ages 25 to 30, my life would have been totally different. So if you're in your teens, 20s, or maybe you're past it, right? Maybe you're in your 30s like myself, I'll tell us that I was affected by this, but I came out on the other side, you could say to some degree, and I'll go over what the great filter is, how it affected me, how you can save yourself, and how I would have done things differently if I knew this from the very beginning. So the great male filter is basically what? It's basically this concept, this notion, which really starts from the first term known as the male advantage. Now, the male advantage basically is what? It says like, hey, when you're in your 30s or 40s or even upwards towards your 50s, right? As a man, your value, right? You can keep increasing the value to society of what a man holds. In other words, in today's terms, we're talking about money, right? Money, you can keep accumulating it as time progresses, as time goes on. You have time, right? In the beginning, you may have no money, and maybe if you're a little smart cookie about it, you could be your health at that top echelon level. In other words, you can have maybe a six pack, maybe not, but maybe you're just physically fit, right? So the male advantage is, in other words, where you can be physically fit, so health is great, and wealth wise, you're also great. So the other part in terms of the pillars of happiness is relationships. You're basically able to garner, keep, maintain, acquire new relations, right? And also choose like what relations do you want because your health is in your favor and the money, it's all good for what you're looking for, your standard, and maybe that much more. The reason it's called a male advantage is because with women, the understanding from a biological perspective is that in their, let's say, teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and so on and so forth as the years go on, the value that a woman is born with, right? So if a man is born with no value, a woman is born with, let's say, what society values her looks from a primitive perspective, right? This is not a judgment or analysis video. This is just like sheer fact, right? And so if that value is at maximum at that certain peak in a woman's life, then as the years go on, depending on which direction we're looking at this graph declining, basically the inherent value decreases over time. So the male advantage is that a male can increase their value, as the years go on versus, how it naturally decreases for a woman. So with that out of the way, right, what the male advantage is, the great filter in the years of like 25 years old to 30 years old for men is that we all know the jocks, right? The jocks in high school, maybe they're on the football team, maybe they're playing some sport, maybe they're good looking, right? Physical is kind of the max value you could have at that age because the assumption is when you're at a certain younger age, you just don't have money, you have all the energy, right? And so if you're physically fit in that age, you're looking good, you're getting all the chicks, like all the things, right? So you fast forward basically 25 to 30 years old, including myself, I saw like, oh my gosh, my how I look, it's like you're talking about I start getting pudgy, I start getting fatter. I'm sitting, 8, 10, 15 hours a day just on the laptop, whether it's work plus a mix of recreation plus like a whole world is on the laptop, right? And so I'm sitting down, I'm not moving, so my metabolism is going downwards. Food wise, it's not like I'm keeping up with nutrition because for me personally, like I used to eat a lot of junk and I would get away with it because I was walking a lot just due to like the routine, but I was younger too, so my metabolism was just, working the way it was, right? So you're just lucky to eat a lot more and then you see no effect, right? But the filter of these ages of 25 to 30, what happens is, okay, your natural look, your natural just how you are, like you need to either have been working out from a young age where your body's in that high metabolic burning rate, right? It's basically burning all the calories that you're taking in, so you're not like gaining weight, right? But also like when you work out, you have posture, you have muscles, there's like a certain look, right? And it's not about aura or how you look from the outside. It's just you maintaining yourself because you want to, right? Or you are through your regimen. So in those 5 years, 25 to 30, the filter, it basically filters out all these folks that maybe were, naturally good looking, naturally physically fit, naturally like everything is fine, right? But now it's like, okay, if you don't start working out, you're basically not able to maintain or sustain what God given were given to you from your birth. And so this filter basically takes away the people that were not doing the work, right? Or have not done the work, whether it's in more of the financial realm or the way to get skills. How do you protect your future self? Because you could be physically fit, and unless you're a trainer and you have a clientele, there is a certain age. Like I used to train with a guy, he's probably maybe 70 years old, honestly. But he's one of the top elites from back in the day, and that's awesome. And his career, it's just what he obsesses over. It's like the longevity of it, right? But if you're just physically fit, you don't really care to, use that as your way of providing value to society, then what other skills do you have? In other words, what have you been doing, right, to set you up for post-filter era, right? What does your life look like? The filter basically says, hey, there's two streams of folks. One is the obvious one that we just mentioned. Everything is great from the get-go, but fast forward, a few years, and it's like, hey, if you were just screwing around, going to the bars, drinking every day, having a crap lifestyle, eating junk food, like, sitting heavily, no exercise, all the things, right? You're basically just, basically waiting. You're evolving into this worse version of yourself because that's naturally just how health goes. It, quote unquote, declines. Now, the other stretch of folks, right? And people that knew this maybe when they're 16, 18, it's next level, right? Because if you know about this, like, hey, if you're especially very vigilant, or if you have folks that are in that age group, right, where you see them like changing over the years, you're like, for me, that face was, oh, I don't like that, right? So like, how do you prevent that? How can you do better? So if I knew this, right, back whenever, it would be great. But how I got affected in this part with the great filter was that I like knew things were happening, but I didn't realize it was really happening. So what that means is English, it's not a cop-out. It's that, hey, wealth-wise, I was always pointing it on, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to do it. This is how fast we're going to do it. Hopefully things work out. I'm going to keep on going. All those things, right? Very fit from a mental perspective to accumulate wealth. So from a young age, I'm talking early 20s, like I went to college and the traditional get a job, get a degree and all these things, and I'm not happy about the outcome. Yet, I'll explain this part, which kind of like helped, right? Because of that outcome, I basically was so money minded, like it's irrespective of the debt took for college or what have us, right? It was about how can I use this money to get to the next step for what I'm looking for. And what I did is I bought a house within like a year of working, mix of saving money from a paycheck, but also trading very heavily in both the stock market and cryptocurrency markets, and then taking those profits to put it into a physical asset, which over the last, almost 10 years has appreciated on its own. And that's not history, but the point is that itself is a huge achievement for many. My standard would be like, man, I wish I had, let's say, 10 homes by 30, right? Why? It's not about, the cash flow only that you could get, but it's also, hey, you could buy and sell these properties, right, as needed for capital inflows, or you can just sell off the whole portfolio, put it into market, just chill off of dividends or, safer strategies to get income. But without all the specifics, right, that's basically what happened is I didn't see like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And the biggest thing is that if you take away money, right, just look at back to physical everything. When you walk into a room or walk on the street, I forgot that when I was younger, there's a lot of attention, and I can only imagine how much attention girls/women get. I got a lot of attention. It's not like I'm saying, oh, I'm a good-looking guy. No, I'm saying like society would be like, oh, wow, this and that. Oh, you're so handsome. Like, all the things, right? And it's very ego lifting, of course, right, when you're younger. But then like the compliments stopped as the years went on. And I was like, what's happening, right? And that's where the ego kicked in. And I realized, yeah, I don't think I look as, what I could be, should be. I was probably like, honestly, like 40, 50 pounds heavier than what you're seeing now. And I'm still like saying that I'm still a little heavier and I could probably lose another maybe 30, 40 pounds. And, why not, get a six pack and, muscle, and how much that counts towards weight is not the point of this convo. But I can be physically fit, the healthiest of my life and certain things like this, right? So why not? Now, I basically was getting less attention. I was like, okay, fine. Let's, slowly change things. Life was going on, all the things, job, stress, managing family, all the whatever, right? Everyone goes through whatever their thing is. And so I realized, I was like, damn, am I on the other side of this, decline? Am I on the filter part where later when I got to know about this concept, I was like, where do I stand? And I realized I'm probably better than a lot of other people, but I'm also not a better than a lot of other people, especially for what I'm comparing against, right? In other words, like, what is happiness? Happiness is basically if you expect something and it happens, maybe you're content. But if you expect something that happens faster and better, then you're really happy. But if you expect something and it doesn't happen, even if it was a normal expectation, right? then you're really not happy, because happiness is really just what you expect. It's kind of like you yourself in your mind of what that means for you. So this great male filter, basically, I was affected by it, where I don't think I came out where the male advantage would happen like this, right? I'm not positioned for it, let's say it like that, for my level of what I think it is. Now, if you tell somebody else, hey, if you have this much in cash, like, can you live the rest of your life? And with what it is right now, you can probably live in Asia and certain countries where a lot of people are leaving America, passport bros movement, all those things, and that's great. But long story short, the great male filter is basically something that if I knew in the beginning, then you can plan even better, right? Even that much better. And so without videos by someone else saying, what is a great male filter at 25 to 30, I'm saying it from my side for the next, rung of people. I'm 31 years old at this time of recording. And I'm just like, man, watch out. If you don't know what it is, this is what it is, and plan accordingly. If you're already past it, the only thing you can do is then build your skills, right? Get back on the high horse. Figure out how are you gonna actually get yourself sorted by the age of, 35, maybe 40. Maybe it's not a time thing. Maybe it's, hey, I can do something and my income is X, and if I keep going, maybe it's scalable, right? And maybe there's a way for you to break out. But this video is not to say the male advantage is the pinnacle of everything, where maybe you have money, you can travel the world, you can meet a bunch of people. But if you're a family person, like, hey, I want wife, kids, and all these things, the male advantage is still an advantage, because having those resources and tools is basically going to afford you what you want. Really, the story is simple. In your early years, you're able to get, quote unquote, anything is the understanding. And people are also more receptive. When you get to 25 to 30, people are like, okay, you've grown a little, you've maybe worked a little, maybe you have some experience. You definitely don't look like you're impressionable like 16, 17, 18, or like 14 years old. If someone comes up to me and says, hey, how do you become a millionaire? I'll probably answer them. Now, if someone says, who's 27, who's 28, hey, how do you become a millionaire? I'll be like, maybe still open. But now if you're like kind of edging 40 and then you're coming up to me like these TikTok videos of, hey, what do you do for a living, or with a microphone in the hand? Like, I think it's just not the same culture, right? And it's almost like, what's going on here? But of course, we all got to make, some bag or add some value. And as long as it's adding value, who cares? So the great male filter is something that I would say, if you can pass to the other side, it's not if, because that's survival methodology, right? But when you do, if you look back, time only goes one direction, it's forward. So you can't go back. So simply put, wherever you are in life right now, maybe you're going to look even worse later, right? Like, it'll be even worse. So you have to take preventative measures. I, in my day-to-day, have started working out. You don't see massive gains. You will, hopefully, right? Sooner than later. But I'm probably one of the more fittest times in my life that I have been. Not the most, but almost there. What that means is a lot of things, but basically just working out, literally not that much more, but I was doing nothing for so many years. And the great male filter from a physical perspective definitely caught up with me, or I basically was doing exactly what would happen by doing the habits that I was, right? But from a wealth perspective, I definitely was always intentional in trying to do the next step. How do you do the next thing? So if you just do a whole bunch of jack diddly squat and you're not taking care of your physical body, then you're going to pass that filter, and then everything just kind of declines, because what do you have to look forward to? You have a physical body that is not at its peak and it's not really conditioned, like an oil change for a car, you're not maintaining it. And then naturally, when you show up in a room, it's like, I want to trust you, right? But I've realized that the people that actually work out, who have that discipline of working out, it's a discipline for many, because it's basically being consistent with something that maybe someone isn't. But because we're all primitive beings, animals, whatever you want to call it, how you look really seals the deal, whether from a first impression perspective or the trust of, hey, this person works out. It's maybe not how they look, but they're disciplined, right? It's about what it tells your physical body, like, or if you're overweight, if you're obese, what does that mean, right? If you look at the statistics, it's like less than 1% of folks that have visible abs, at least in the US. And what doesn't matter about like having abs or showing it, right? It's about body fat percentage, about being healthy. And all of that is kind of tied in together. So all of that said, right, all these years, what have I been doing? Yeah, I'm basically an investor outside of everything else. Yeah, I talked about the stock market, the cryptocurrency markets, of course, real estate. And so I'm basically saying that, hey, the male advantage, right, the part where whether it's now for myself or for anyone that's watching, it's basically like the community of, hey, how do you become richer and wealthier? So for me personally, my expertise, right, if you talk about real estate, I basically look at it, and this portion is kind of sponsored by me officially, but it's really a win-win situation. And there's a link in the description below to get in touch one-on-one. Happy to give us all the details. where basically there's a real estate project that we're building. It's a 250 hotel room. Now, the beauty about this project is that if I wanted to invest into a Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, Wyndham, IHG, all these type of hotels, it's not happening. I mean, if I know them, I have connections, all those things, great. But the average Joe, I'm saying I'm the average Joe in this case, I can't get access to the deal. So after years and years and years, I'm making the deal because I look at it like, hey, if I can't get a seat at the table, I'll create the table. And basically, the intention here is simple. It's basically an investment where construction has started and it's totally like land is owned and the development is done like in-house, like me, myself, team, that kind of thing. So what that means is with construction having been started, until construction is complete, right, it could be 2 to 3 years. And so you're basically buying, right, 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom or a piece of land. And in all 3 scenarios, you're going to own real land in your name underneath the hotel. Like that's how it works basically. And so that land, it's basically having X value, right? And so if you're spending, let's say, up to 15K to 3 mil today, right, whichever range in there, USD, depending on where you're watching from, you basically will own land that will be developed. So there's appreciation there. Then that developed land is a commercial land, right? So then further appreciation. And you have cash flows that you'd be a part of, right? Monthly income, because you actually own property. Like you're a part of the future, right, of the business. So the point is you have appreciation on paper and eventually you have cash flows. But it's not just eventually. In my case, how I look at it just through different investment models, instead of me going to the bank and borrowing X, right? Like more than 50% is already from my side. The crowdfunding, if you want to call it that, right, or debt-backed funding more formally, it's basically saying like, hey, you're basically providing to this project. Instead of me giving interest rate to the bank, I'm happy to give it to us even before construction is complete. So it's like monthly rental income when it's open, right? But it's in advance. Why? Because it's a win-win scenario where you're still getting cash flow because this is like the deal that you're in, right? But I'm basically saying, let's not give it to the bank. Let me just say thank you to you. Let's us keep going. And in the end, it's all said and done, right? After 2-3 years, you have appreciation on the land. I can say 2 to 3x. This is YouTube and there's compliance and I can't guarantee anything, right? At the same time, if you're looking at, let's say maybe 8, 9, 10%, a month, even before construction is completed, right? And that's not every month, that's annualized. So the point is you're still getting like some base returns. It's not like it's sitting in a checking account earning nothing, right? Or a savings account that's only getting, let's say 2, 3, maybe 4%, right? Like high yield savings accounts. So all of this to say, if you're interested, there's a link in the description below. The Great Male Filter, simply put, is something that if everyone knew about it earlier, it would be great, right? Society would be that much better because everyone can play more optimally. But then we are that many people in the world, 8 billion people, so we've got to learn and learn and learn step by step through videos like this and just through other folks and networking community and all the things, then that's the game we got to play. But with all that said, thanks for coming this far. Like, share, subscribe, all the things. Check out other videos. I'll leave some over here. But with that, see you in the next one. Peace for now.